So y'all liked that last video we did a couple months ago. How to get more done in 1 week than most people do in 1 year. We're giving the people what they want. We're doing how to get more done in 1 month than most people do in 1 year. I wanna go over 5 reasons why productivity advice is complete and utter BS and what you should do instead. I do want to give credit before we jump in. A lot of these ideas come from the book, The One Thing. One of my favorites. You can read it in like 2 hours. Doesn't take too much brain power, which is probably why it's my favorite, and it's got a lot of pictures. Big idea number 1. This is the myth that you need to be productive, okay? And I want to tell you a personal story. I don't share much in videos. I think I've shared it maybe once or twice about how productivity almost ruined my life. When I was coming of age in my 20s, it was a very interesting time for social media content. There weren't a lot of videos on balancing your mental health, recharging, like good self-improvement advice. It was grind set. It was like entrepreneur, bro, you know, someone's working while you're sleeping. If you don't want it as bad as you want to breathe, you're gonna fail. Gary V's screaming at you, you gotta hustle for 16 hours a day. I didn't know any better, and I thought that sounded legit. And that's exactly what I did. From age 20 to probably 27, I mean, no exaggeration, I was working 16 hours a day. I would fall asleep with my laptop looking at like a spreadsheet or metrics or analytics every single second of every day. And worse, I had this guilt. If I wasn't doing that, then I can't be relaxing right now because that means I don't want it. I mean, this is crazy. I was at family vacations or Christmas and feeling guilty that I wasn't working and on my grind. I would drink all the time to like wind down. Then I would do a lot of caffeine to wind up. It was a mess. My health was terrible. My sleep was terrible. And one day it all came crashing down. I woke up, business as usual. Okay, 16-hour workday starts now. Open my laptop and immediately I feel beads of sweat coming down my face. My face feels cold. I feel numb. My heart rate's racing. I'm hyperventilating. That's a very scary feeling. I immediately went to, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. I'm only like 27. What is going on? So I call 911 and they come in the apartment, take my vital signs. Yeah, everything looks fine. Look, dude, this is a panic attack. And I'll be honest, my pride was like, panic attack? What are you talking about? But when I was able to finally calm myself down, looking back on it, they were 100% right. I had never experienced that in my life. That was from being overwhelmed, overworked, and overstressed. And so I made the decision there that I gotta get healthy, and part of getting healthy is fixing this mindset that you always have to be productive at everything. That might be the thing that's holding me back. I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. I said, I'm not leaving this place until I fix that lifestyle and until I actually find a sustainable, authentic way to grow my business and my career. The crazy thing is that it worked. I went from working probably 16-hour days down to a manageable 10, and I got way more done. I went from feeling overwhelmed and stressed all the time to having a couple projects that I felt really good about that were way more successful than anything I'd ever done. Went from posting 5 videos a week down to 1, and it took off. See, this is the very first thing I wanna drill into your mind. The myth is be productive at everything. The solution is be focused on the right things. What is the right thing for you? Well, I guarantee it's not 20 or 30 or 40 things. It's one thing. The biggest companies you know do this, and that's why they're billion-dollar companies. KFC, their one thing, chicken. Apple, their one thing, the iProduct, iMac, iPod, iSuite. Google, they started out their one thing, one website, search. Intel, their one thing, microprocessors. We could go down the list and every single company started as one thing, one focus that they did very, very well. What is the one thing that if you got done this month could wipe out everything else? Like everything else didn't matter, this one thing does. 1 week, 1 day. And keep asking yourself, what is most important? If you're like, well, I don't know what my one thing is, we'll come back to this with more tactics, but I wanna keep this moving and go to number 2. So I wanna talk about the myth of willpower. Where there's a will, there's a way. when you look at research, willpower isn't infinite, it's finite. It's a renewable resource that replenishes, but you don't have an unlimited amount of it. And there's one study that I find so fascinating I wanted to share here. It looked at Israeli parole systems and their breaks. So they studied over 1,000 parole hearings that determined if an inmate got off early for good behavior or if they had to, complete their full sentence. You know what they found was the biggest determining factor of if it was a yes or a no? It was lunchtime. At the morning, they had, 60% chance, and then it faded down to next to 0 until they had their AM break. Then it went back up and it faded down to 0 until they had their PM break, their afternoon. And then by the end of the day, it was 0 again. Imagine a lack of a tuna sandwich being the reason you had to serve an extra 5 years. I wanted to let you off, but I was really hungry, man. Your brain is 1/50th of your body weight, but it uses 1/5 of your total energy. Thinking makes you tired. Decisions make you tired. What also depletes willpower? Having a lot of fear. Doing things you don't love. That requires more energy. So if you're going to a job every day and then at the end you want to build your side hustle or your passion or create art and you're wondering, oh, man, why don't I have the willpower? It's because if you're doing something you don't love for 8 hours, by the end of it, who doesn't want to just curl up and sit on their couch? It's going to take way more willpower from you. Practically, you know this to be true. When do most people cheat on their diet? It's not first thing in the morning. You grab a ice cream from the freezer. It's at 11 p.m. at night, right? You can be good for 23 and a half hours of the day, but it's that last 30 minutes when you're tired and your willpower is depleted like the judges that it gets you and you cave. So this is why productivity advice, it matters, but time of day also matters. And there's a saying I love, which is manage your energy, not your time. So the solution here, more practically, finding your golden hours, the times where you're best, you have the most willpower, you're freshest. For me personally, this is first thing in the morning. The first 2 hours of my day, I get in a flow state. So when I'm making this video, I do the most important thing first thing in the morning. But for some, I know some musicians and authors who make their best work after 11 p.m. That's their golden hour. That's their best time of day. It'll vary for you. But then also what I find is maybe more important, finding your siesta hours. This is what I call it, where they have a siesta midday break. So the times of day where you're not your best, that you're a little sluggish or tired. Again, this will be different for you. For me, personally, it's normally after lunch. So from 11 p.m. to 2 or 3 p.m., that's when I'm chilling or doing some more admin tasks or low effort thing. Or maybe I'll take a break totally, go on a walk, watch a show, totally recharge during that time. You want to talk productivity hacks? This has been one of the biggest ones for me. If you do nothing else but this week, is audit yourself. When am I freshest? When can I think the clearest, talk the clearest? When am I at my best? And then what are the times of days where, I need to chill out a bit more? And this is how you manage your energy, not your time. And I guarantee you, if you prioritize doing your one thing during the hours that you're freshest, you'll get way more done. Let's keep going with practical stuff. The next point, do not click off thinking you've heard this before, because this is super, super important. And every single time I hang around millionaires or friends that have really successful businesses, they're obsessed with this one principle. So it's not just oh, that's a beginner concept. This is it right here. In fact, this might be the most important concept of the video. There was an economist who was in his garden one day, probably 1800s, somewhere around there, and he noticed a pattern that 20% of his pods were yielding 80% of the peas. And what's fascinating is that other economists found that principle in practically every area it was showing up. 20% of the roads get 80% of the traffic. 20% of your clothes probably get 80% of the wear. And my favorite, 20% of the people drink 80% of the beer, which was definitely me before I went sober. Better known as the 80-20 principle, that 20% of your input is giving you 80% of your output. And this is the problem with productivity advice, is it's treating everything as equal. And so what happens here, you come up with a to-do list, right? Have you ever made one of these? Well, you know that when you make a to-do list and you put everything you need to get done on there, what usually gets checked off first? The easy things. But man, there's really 2 things on there that are actually gonna progress you towards your vision or your goal, your big goal. And those are usually the ones we're avoiding. That's what I realized when I audited my to-do list back from in the day. Your solution is not making a to-do list, it's making a success list. So write out everything you need to do, that's fine, but then ask yourself, what's the 20% of this? And then cross out everything that doesn't matter. I did this even one step further. I don't make to-do lists for a day. I make them for a week. And let me know if you want a video on this, but this changed the game for me. That instead of daily to-do lists where you write out everything, you do weekly to-do lists. Things feel more manageable when you look at your whole week instead of just a day-to-day. To recap, point number 3, 20% of your hours will give you 80% of the results. Write out everything you need to do, cross out anything that's not important in that 20%. And if you want to go a step further, experiment with a weekly to-do list, because then you'll only put on there what matters instead of the little things that you get stuck in the checkoff game with. Moving on to point number 4. I'll try and get out of the way for this one. This one is on multitasking and how it's one of the biggest scams out there. That even some companies are like, we want you to be a really good multitasker, can handle multiple projects at once. You know, that's a complete myth. That when you're doing 2 things at once, your brain isn't doing 2 things, it's not split. It's bouncing back and forth very, very fast. In fact, there was some research that was interesting that said every 11 minutes in a corporate workplace is how much the average person gets interrupted. And then an estimated 1/3 of the entire day is lost to these interruptions. There was some more research in a New York Times article, Driven to Distractions, that said 16% of all car fatalities were due to distracted driving, 2 things at once. What's more interesting is that people who are self-proclaimed like good multitaskers, they overestimate the amount of time things will take versus people who are like, yeah, I can only do 1 thing at a time. But why is this? Is it simply the doing 2 things at once? It's something deeper. It's a principle called task switching, okay? That when you are doing 1 thing and then you go to the second thing, your brain has to reset and get in the flow state for that second thing. I know you've experienced this. You know, if you're working on a project and then you get interrupted and then you have to go to a meeting or you have to get on a Zoom meeting, well, getting back to that project, you know, it's not just you snap back instantly. It takes you 10, 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes you don't even get back in that flow state. It's that serious. Now, there are some times where this doesn't really matter as much with less cognitively demanding tasks. Like if you're doing the dishes and then you go take out the trash, that's not going to be like, oh, it takes me 10 to 20 minutes. It's the things where you're in a flow state, where you're really deep in your work, where you're connecting the dots. In other words, it looks sort of like this. Okay, I have a wrong approach and a right approach. I got this from the One Thing. There's work, then you switch, you have to reorient yourself. Maybe there's a distraction, then you switch, you have to reorient yourself back to the work. This is how much time it takes. That can be a whole day where you have only 2 really good work blocks in it because of the distractions. Versus when you block out time and you get in a flow state and you don't have distractions, it looks more like this. And what you find is that in 2 to 4 hours, you can get done what most people would get done in 8 to 10 hours, maybe not at all. When everyone started working from home, a funny thing happened. People were able to get done 8 hours of work in 4. And there were actually some people who took 2, even 3 jobs with that extra time because they were more productive and they were making 200-300 grand on multiple salaries. It's pretty funny. Why were they able to do that? It's because when there were no distractions in their home, they were able to bang out their 8-hour day in sometimes 3 or 4 hours. My girlfriend knows this about me, that the first couple hours of my day, you know, I have the door shut, I get up extremely early and to not interrupt me. And I know that sounds very intense, And at the beginning, we even had a few fights on it because she's like, why are you rude to me in the morning? I'm like, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just really focused on this. And then when I'm done with this, I'll give you, I'll be happier and I'll give you a lot of time. And now she totally respects it. But that was a boundary that I had to set living with someone, is like, dude, if my door's shut first thing in the morning, I'm like hunkered down at work. Another thing that really helped me, you might want to consider, I theme my days throughout the week. So I found instead of doing a little bit each day for what I do with content creation, coaching, program design, everything that needs to get done, I wear a lot of hats. Well, if I do all my filming on Monday, all my writing on Tuesday or Thursday, all my admin on Wednesday or meetings, that works way better because your brain isn't switching between those 15 different tasks. So another question for you really want to be productive. How can you batch your tasks into 1, 2, maybe 3 days a week, and then you have some creative days as well? That's worked extremely well for me over the years. All right, one more. There's one more important point, and it's on habits. A lot of people can beat themselves up because they can't maintain them, right? You ever tried to do an exercise program and you fall off after a couple weeks? Or, you oscillate between extremes. Like, I'm gonna stop doing everything I know is bad for me and start doing everything that's good for me. But there's interesting research out on habit change. So over here we have discipline and effort that you're putting in, the amount. And down here we have time. So right here is where it doesn't take as much effort and discipline, and it becomes automatic for you. You don't have all this effort learning how to tie your shoe when you go to tie it because you've done it so many times, it's automatic. Same thing with you driving. Remember the first couple times you drove and you're like pitting out because you're using so much energy and your mom's screaming at you and you're just like doing everything you can not to crash. But now people can drive to the gym and eat a Chipotle burrito, right? So this is what happens over time with everything. It gets easier. This right here is the magical number. How long does it take to develop a habit? You would say 21 days. Most people would. That's the common literature. University College of London actually found when they studied people, it took 66 days. That's a big difference. 21 days, that's over 3 times that it takes to really solidify a habit. And the bigger the habits, the longer it'll probably take. So why am I putting this in here? Because if you're trying to develop new habits like getting up early or putting in work or focusing on your one thing, it's so easy to beat ourselves up and say, well, I couldn't do it for 21 days or even a week. I quit. So that's just not for me or it doesn't work. But be easy on yourself because you're not broken. You're not a failure if it takes you longer. In fact, it will probably take you 66 days. Because when you focus on your one thing, you're worried about being focused, not productive. You know your golden hours and you prioritize those. You have a success list, a weekly one. You also time block and you're not distracted, losing tons of time, and you give it 66 days. That's how you'll get more done in 1 month than most people do in a distracted year. If you want our free 11 questions to change your life, I'll link them down below for YouTube subscribers. You'll also be on our email list where I send out a weekly email broadcast with good tips as well. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Stop settling, start living. See ya.